Just opened the box on the next install on the Jeep Rubicon, the Falcon Series 3.3 Fast Adjust Piggyback shocks. Here is the right front that I'm checking measurements and making sure everything fits properly. When I purchased the vehicle, I had these Rubicon Express put on. They are a decent shock, midline I would guess, and they've done well, but with the weight that I plan on carrying and the weight that I carried to Colorado, to Overland Expo, Mountain West, they just didn't get the job done, and that's why I am replacing them now with the Falcon 3.3 Fast Adjust. We're going to go ahead and get started on this right front by removing the Rubicon shock. You'll need the Allen wrench for the top, and if you notice in their video in TeraFlex, it says that the screw here is a 15, and it's not. It's a 17 millimeter, and their replacement screw is actually a 19 millimeter. But you're going to need an Allen wrench for the bolt and then remove the nut. You want to do the top first. Before you do the bottom, make sure that your axle is supported. Obviously, I have two jack stands here and two further back, plus the tires underneath. So we'll remove these first, the 17 and the Allen wrench, and then we'll remove this one, which is an 18 millimeter. We'll go ahead and get that done now. Okay, a couple things to note here. We're going to remove the bushing washer and nut, and these two will go on top and mount this way. You also want to make sure that the tab, I don't know if you can see this here, the tab sits in that little cutout for it, and then this arm will go into the back here. So you just make sure that this is in place. This goes up and inside, and this will go into the hole in the back of the mounting. They also tell you that right, left. So I've got the top bushing and the washer and the nut on the top. Again, you want to make sure that this arm fits within the mounted hole for it on top, and the back of the arm goes out of the frame on the other side. So right now I have it just finger tight. I'll make sure everything's in place, and then the top we'll go ahead and torque down now. We are going to use the factory bolt and nut for the bottom. So we'll go ahead and get that positioned into place, get this through to help hold it, and then I'll tighten this one down. That way we've got a firm base and we're applying pressure to the top. Okay, after a couple attempts, getting the shaft of the shock to go upward is proving to be really difficult. There's probably better angles when you're in a shop and it's on an actual lift, but when you're doing it in your garage, you got to resort to what works. So I'm going to use my jack and lift it up and help get that into place. Okay, even using the jack like I did, this was still really difficult to get lined up. It takes a little bit of effort. Just get it shifted a little bit at a time. If you can, get it up higher so that when you release it, it starts to come down slowly and you can put the bolt through. You are going to use the factory hardware for the lower eyelet here. I don't know if you can see that, but the lower eyelet, I've got the bolt in there now. I'm going to tighten the top down first. Make sure that the tab is seated properly, and we'll get that tightened down. And then we'll tighten down the bolt on the lower eyelet to 40 foot-pounds. Now TeraFlex, the way that they engineered these is they say you don't need to torque down the top bolt, nut, sorry. You want to hand tighten it. Obviously I'm using a ratchet and it is a 19 millimeter. So I'm going to tighten that down, hand tight, and then the lower eye socket, 18 millimeter, we will torque that down to 40 foot-pounds. So this is the front passenger side install. The top was tightened down. Remember that the tab needs to be in place, and that arm back here, I don't know if you can see that or not, that arm needs to be through that hole. Make sure those are in place first before you tighten down. The eyelet at the bottom is a bit of a pain just to get the shock in place and wrenched up to level because it's down here when you're ready to install it. So you have to put a lot of pressure on it. I used the jack to get it up, snugged it in there, and then I was able to lift it up to get the original hardware in place. 18 millimeter, 19 on this side. This does get torqued down to 40 foot-pounds. There you go. Now we'll move to the driver's side. So here's our Allen key. This side has a couple of cables and brackets in the way, so you really need to look out for that. Just kind of find a way to get it in there. This is on the driver's side front. There's a cable bracket right in the way, and it doesn't look like it's easily removed, so I'm just trying to work my way around it to see if that's possible. Right now, it doesn't seem like it's going to be. Yay. Make sure you grab the bushing from the top as well. It'll fall off, but go ahead and grab it. And there is the driver's side, old Rubicon Express, removed. Okay, so we're repeating the process that we did on the passenger side for the front. So we're taking the supplied bushing from TeraFlex and the nut, and we're going to place those on top, and then we'll make sure that the tab goes in here as we put the shock up and through the mount on the frame, and then we'll get that tightened down just enough. Okay, I tried compressing the shock shaft first and then lifting the whole thing up into place and trying to align the top and the tab in the back into the frame, and after 6 attempts I gave up, so I went ahead and installed the top first, and I'll do the same thing that I did on the passenger side, where I put the jack underneath, lift it up, and then push it into place. Okay, got the left side installed. This one was definitely a pain in the ass. Again, that bracket, that hose bracket at the top, and where it was located just made it almost impossible to get at that Allen key. Finally got to it, got that off. The shock is installed on the driver's side, torqued to 40 foot-pounds. I'm gonna go ahead and get the wheels back on, turn the vehicle around, and get started on the rear shocks. Anytime you take off the wheels, especially if you don't get to them that often, it's a good idea to go ahead and clean them up if you can. I have that TeraFlex Delta big brake kit on my vehicle, and their high friction brake pads are amazing, but they also create a ton of dust. I will be swapping those out, and while I'm doing the shocks, I want to go ahead and get the wheels cleaned because they're really bad with brake dust, so I'm going to take care of that before I put the front wheels back on. So a side-by-side comparison of the Falcon 3.3 Fast Adjust Piggyback and my old Rubicon Express. This is the rear shock for the Falcon, and while it's the front for the Rubicon, it's a monotube, and the front and the rear are exact same. They just have a different tapered end for the mounting point, but you can see the difference in the two. We're going to go ahead and get these rears installed now. Alright, so we're going to use an 18mm on both sides to remove the lower part of the shock first from the eyelet. Then we'll remove the top afterward and pull the old shock out and get the new spot ready for the new shock. We will have to drill this outside eyelet to 5/8, and then we'll be able to put in the spacer and have the new shock sit outside of this. So I have these shock protectors on, and as you can see, I'm probably going to have to remove this one because the bolt top is on this side and it should be on this side. It's correct on the passenger side, and there's no way to remove this bolt because of it. So I'm forced to have to remove this first, which sucks. But we'll have to go ahead and get this removed, which means here, here, and here, messing with the control arm. Okay, finally got the driver's side rear Rubicon Express shock off. The issue I was having before is, and it's my mistake, I had the bolt like this, and it's hitting the shock skid plate. So I had to loosen the shock skid plate, but this bolt should have been this direction, but loosened it, took care of it, and now that's off. We're going to go ahead and bore out this side of the eyelet to 5/8, so that way the new hardware can fit in with the bracket. It's always fun drilling holes into your vehicle. Okay, I finally have the new Falcon 3.3 shock on the rear driver side installed. The bolts at the top, I tightened those down to 15 foot-pound. The one thing I do want to mention here is that this bolt here is different than their video and their instruction guide that comes with the kit. So I don't have the proper tool for this one. I'm using the vice grip, as you can see. I'm going to use a torque wrench on the other side and get this 19mm torqued down to 40 foot-pounds. Okay, the driver side rear is installed. 40 foot-pounds on the bottom eyelet. Again, if you notice in their videos, this is different, so just be aware of that. Make sure you have the proper tools for that. I think this is a 22. I didn't have one, that's why I was using the vice grips. You can see at the top, those are now tightened down to 15 foot-pounds. I'll get into the adjustment settings after I get the passenger side installed. Okay, we got the rear passenger side lifted. The wheel is off, obviously. We're going to get to work on removing this 18mm, get that undone. We'll work on the two bolts up top, take this shock out. Again, we're going to do a 5/8 bore on the eyelet down here, so we'll get that drilled. You want to drill it on the outside, and you notice the bolt on this one is the proper direction, so I'll have a much easier time getting this off, and I won't have to loosen the skid plate on this side. We'll get that taken care of, bore it out with the 5/8, and then we'll start installing the new shock. Those are 16mm. there's the old shock. Okay, next I'm going to bore out this side. Remember, it's the outside of the eyelet. You want to bore to 5/8. Okay, so the rear is finally installed. That's the driver's side rear Falcon shock installed. And there's the right side, the passenger side. I'm going to put the tire back on next, or the wheel. I got to clean it first, make sure everything's torqued down properly. And yeah, there we go. That's the install of the Falcon 3.3 fast adjust piggyback shocks. Okay, so I want to go over the fast adjust knobs and briefly tell you what each one is. One thing I do want to bring up, this is the front driver side. I've seen people where they cut some of this material out. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with that yet. So for now, I'm leaving the factory plastic in there. I do want to upgrade my fenders at some point, so I'll consider that in that time. But for now, there's access to everything. So out of the 3 dials, 1, 2, which is where it's at right now, and then 3 is over here to the left behind the fender wall. Number 2 is the custom setting. That's the only one that the micro dial works on. And as you can see right now, I have it on 2 and 5, but you can adjust this micro dial as needed based on the comfort level you want or the conditions that you're driving in. Number 3 is for firm. That's sport on-road, and it gives you increased bottoming resistance when you're going off-road. And then number 1, again, is for soft on-road ride for comfort. All right, so that's a wrap on the install for the Falcon 3.3 piggyback fast adjust shocks. I replaced my Rubicon Express. I just didn't like their weight load, and they were sagging a bit, especially when I'm doing some overlanding and I have a lot of gear in the vehicle. So these new Falcon shocks are definitely going to help with that. I did get the TeraFlex 4-inch coil springs. I'm going to have the shop install those for me and do the alignment at the same time. They'll need to adjust the control arms that I have. Everything went really well. It's very straightforward. The only issues that I had was compressing the shocks enough to get them to fit in the front and in the rear. It's a bit of a pain, but you just have to work it a bit. Make sure that you're not pinching your fingers or messing with the threads on the bolts. Just take your time with it. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you're running right now, if you plan on upgrading your shocks and what you're upgrading to. If you have these, let me know what you think of them. And I appreciate you guys being here. Like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.